Everything has its allotted destiny. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Greetings to everyone watching. With so many tuning in online, I can't see all of you, but I extend a warm welcome to each one. To those here in person and all of you joining us remotely, greetings. I wish every one of you, dear Buddhist friends, good health to navigate this ongoing pandemic. Afterwards, we can all resume our regular practices and focus on rebuilding. Today's topic is a little lighthearted, nothing too intense. Everything has its allotted destiny. This might sound like something a fortune teller would say, wouldn't it? But there is a profound truth to it. You know, someone approached me recently and asked, "Master, why is it that I work incredibly hard? I truly exert myself. I pour all my effort into what I do, but I just can't seem to get ahead? I can't become wealthy. I live frugally, I am diligent, I always try my best, I strive, I educate myself, I understand things, basically everything I've observed successful, wealthy people do. I've done it too. Yet I remain without wealth." That question reminds me of something my grandmother used to tell me when she was younger. She was quite a character, my gran. She would often say, "A dry tree has dry branches and leaves. If you're fated to be poor, then no matter where you go, you'll still be poor." She was from the Hue region, you see. And that's their way of putting it. If you're poor, poverty will follow you. And there's a truth to that, isn't there? It seems that no matter what you do, if you carry that destiny of poverty, you just remain poor. So when someone poses such a question, the straightforward answer is simply this: because you do not yet possess the destiny to be rich. That word, destiny or fate, sounds like the domain of fortune tellers, but in reality, even what fortune tellers perceive operates within the larger framework of cause and effect of karma. When we are born, we genuinely do have a destiny, and that destiny is precisely our accumulated karma, gathered over many, many lifetimes. I want to emphasize that many lifetimes, not just the one immediately preceding this. Our current station in life, whatever level we find ourselves at in this world, isn't just determined by our last life. It has been shaped and set by countless past lives. Whether we are born into a noble family or a humble one, this has actually been laid down by innumerable previous existences. This becomes what we refer to as our allotted destiny or fate. This destiny manifests in us in certain ways that fortune tellers with their particular intuitive skills can sometimes discern. They have their methods for reading it, for sensing these underlying karmic patterns. We Buddhists do not specialize in such arts, but those who do. They attempt to read our destiny, which is essentially an attempt to read our karma from past lives. For example, they might observe someone's facial features and declare, "This person has the destiny to be rich." And sure enough, often regardless of circumstances, they grow up and, somehow, they become rich. Conversely, if someone has the destiny to be poor, then no matter what they do, no matter how diligently they try, they will likely remain poor. I have asked some people, individuals who have worked their entire lives, "What's your perspective on this?" And they will often say, "Venerable, my whole life has just been, well, just enough to eat. Not desperately poor, but never able to become rich. No matter how hard I try, I just can't seem to break through. If I manage to save a little bit extra, something unexpected immediately happens, an illness, an unforeseen expense, and I have to spend it. That little nest egg just vanishes. I can never seem to accumulate assets beyond a certain level. Almost as if some unseen force has arranged it this way. I don't understand it. If I have a bit of a surplus, someone in the family gets sick and poof, the money is gone. It's a curious thing. This destiny. Take my own life, for instance. Years ago, there was a man who practiced astrology. He examined my chart and announced, "This boy, when he grows up, is destined to be a beggar." And he was absolutely correct. But, hearing that pronouncement, I was utterly terrified. So I immediately rushed to pay homage to the Buddha, to sincerely engage in Buddhist practice. And it's true, that fundamental beggar's destiny, the reliance on others for sustenance, didn't entirely change. However, the way I experienced that destiny, the circumstances surrounding it, transformed dramatically because of my practice. If I hadn't taken refuge in the Buddha and applied myself to the teachings, people might have given me alms by simply tossing coins into my hat or cap. But because I had taken refuge and practiced with sincerity, people now offer support respectfully, often placing it in an envelope. You see, there's a world of difference. just like that. It's like this. Imagine someone goes to a fortune teller. The fortune teller strokes his beard and proclaims, "Young man, in the future you will be a pillar of the nation." Hearing this, the fellow becomes very self-satisfied and neglects any spiritual practice. He doesn't pay homage to the Buddha. And sure enough, later in life, he does become a pillar, an actual, unmoving electricity pole by the side of the road, a far cry from the national leader he envisioned. But if he had sincerely paid homage to the Buddha and cultivated his virtue, he could have genuinely become an important, respected figure, someone the country relies upon. It's quite amazing how our life's path can diverge so significantly based on our choices and actions. Don't underestimate this. Or take another illustrative story. A young man visits a fortune teller. The seer, after stroking his beard thoughtfully, says, "Young man, in the future, you will hold thousands of lives in your hands." The young man is overjoyed, believing he's destined for some grand position. And so he doesn't bother with spiritual practice or paying homage to the Buddha. Well, years later, he ends up as a duck herder, literally responsible for several thousand ducks. Now, had he sincerely paid homage to the Buddha and diligently cultivated himself, he could have become a great general, a commander holding the lives of thousands of soldiers under his charge. A position of great honor and responsibility. So, you see, you must be cautious when you hear a fortune teller's pronouncements. Your subsequent actions, particularly your commitment to spiritual practice, determine the actual outcome of any predicted destiny. It's like if someone is told, "Oh, this boy, when he grows up, he'll be touching people's heads and faces." Now, one must be careful. If he doesn't bother to cultivate himself or pay homage to the Buddha, he might indeed end up as a barber, right? Touching heads and faces all day long. But if he does sincerely pay homage to the Buddha and practices virtue, then indeed, if he wishes to pat someone on the head, perhaps offering a blessing, people would be overjoyed and readily offer their heads for him to touch. It's a completely different scenario, you see. So there is this destiny, this allotted karmic path, but importantly, there's always an open door and opportunity for us to make choices, to exert effort, and to influence the outcome. It's not as if destiny is absolutely fixed and unchangeable. It's like when that astrologer said I'd be a beggar. In essence, that karmic pattern was true. I couldn't entirely escape it. Even if I didn't want to, I still had to live a life reliant on begging, in the sense of receiving alms. So, people do indeed have this destiny that is shaped by their past lives. Now then, if someone desires to become rich, what should they do first? Well, they should endeavor to acquire the destiny of wealth first and then strive to become rich. It makes sense, doesn't it? You need to have that underlying destiny of wealth in place as a foundation, and then you can effectively pursue becoming wealthy. If you don't possess that foundational destiny, then no matter how intensely you struggle, you likely won't become rich. That's a fundamental principle. There's no other way around it. And to transform oneself from a not rich destiny to a rich destiny, is that an easy task? Oh no, not easy at all. Not in the slightest. You could dedicate your entire life to making merit, to performing good deeds, and it might still not be sufficient to guarantee that you'll cross over into a wealthy and noble existence in your future lives. Not necessarily. And I am speaking here of arduously making merit for an entire lifetime. For example, when we read ancient stories such as those in the scriptures, we might encounter a tale where a man, because he made a single offering of a food tray to a certain venerable monk, was later reborn into a glorious and wealthy life. But these stories often don't fully spell out the crucial context, that it might have taken many, many lifetimes of continued progress, of consistently accumulating great merit after that initial potent good deed. For instance, imagine that person met an arhat, an enlightened saint, and offered him a set of robes or a delicious meal. Perhaps it was his own meal for the day. And seeing this monk passing by, not even knowing he was an arhat, he felt moved by pure faith to offer his food, choosing to go hungry himself that day. Then the scriptures might say that because of that single offering, he later became a king. Now, we, reading this, might only see the one meal and then, boom, kingship. We don't always realize that the act of forgoing his own meal to offer it to an arhat was just the initial karmic seed. In many subsequent lifetimes, the positive karmic connection established with that arhat, even after the arhat entered nirvana, subtly guided that poor householder to perform one virtuous deed after another, life after life, until he finally reached that lifetime of ultimate glory as a king. It's rarely just because of one meal in one lifetime that you become a king in the immediate next life. We shouldn't misunderstand the long-term workings of karma. Once you grasp the principles of karma, you realize that the time it takes for karmic results to fully ripen and manifest can be very, very long. Similarly, when you look at your own life and perceive that you don't seem to possess the destiny of wealth, don't think that making merit for just 1 or 2 lifetimes will be enough to change it. Your mindset, your vision, has to extend far into the future, perhaps 1,000 lifetimes ahead, or even more. And I'm not even talking yet about the immense effort required to become a saint. This is just about achieving material wealth. To be able to genuinely transform your status from a poor destiny to a rich destiny, you have to make merit. This is assuming you understand karma, and you have to make merit in a particularly special and profound way, not just through ordinary, superficial good deeds. Many people, after they encounter Buddhist teachings, learn about the law of karma and come to realize that they must make merit. But when I observe the way they go about making merit, it's often not the kind of dedicated, profound action that can truly transform their destiny and elevate them to a state of wealth and nobility in future lives. Even though they understand the theory of karma, even though they may have a genuine inclination to make merit, the manner in which they do it isn't special enough to create that profound positive shift. Why is that, you might ask? Because the merit they make isn't sufficiently abundant. Their compassion and love for others aren't consistently great enough. The help they offer isn't thorough enough, isn't seen through to the very end, isn't truly devoted, isn't complete in its intention and execution. For example, they might see someone in need and casually say, "Oh, son, go give them 5 liters of rice." They ensure the 5 liters of rice are given. And that's the end of it. They don't concern themselves any further with that person's ongoing fate or struggles. This person, although they've performed an act of giving, is unlikely to change their fundamental destiny to a rich one through such actions. But then, consider another person. They also arrange for 5 liters of rice to be given. But in their heart, they continue to ponder, after they finish consuming these 5 liters of rice, what will they live on next? Is there anything more I can do to help them? Even if their actual capacity to give at that moment is limited to those 5 liters of rice, their heart doesn't abandon the needy person. They remain mentally connected, they follow up if possible. They look for ways to help them thoroughly, to see them through their difficulties. Those who help others in such a consistently thorough and devoted way, whose love and concern are so deep that even if they can't immediately make the person rich or happy, their heart continues to ache with empathy and worry unceasingly, constantly thinking of this person's suffering, that person's suffering. Their heart always heavy with this genuine, compassionate concern. Now, you might raise an objection. Practicing Buddhism is for liberation. Master, you keep talking about having a heavy heart. That doesn't sound like liberation at all. No, my friends, it is precisely those individuals with a heart made heavy by profound, active compassion for others who will ultimately attain liberation. Those who try to brush everything aside merely to make their own hearts feel light and unburdened, those people risk remaining forever bound within this cycle of worldly suffering. I want to strongly emphasize that point, but for now, let's set aside the ultimate goal of liberation. Just to escape a poor destiny and achieve a rich destiny, that alone is by no means a simple matter. Don't think, "Oh, I have some money, so I'll make a few donations here and there. I have money, so I'll help out whoever happens to need it." That kind of casual, intermittent giving by itself is unlikely to change your destiny from poor to rich. This is because fundamentally transforming your destiny from poor to rich actually requires a considerable degree of ingrained moral virtue and a fairly high level of wisdom. It's not a simple transactional process. When you help someone, strive to help them profoundly. Help them with genuine devotion. Help them all the way, seeing things through to the very end. Never stop halfway. Sometimes, even after you've helped someone, you might feel a disinclination to continue, perhaps due to your own fatigue or other concerns. But then you pause for a moment and realize that in their heart, they are still waiting, still hoping, and your stopping would cause them deep disappointment. And so, you find you simply can't bring yourself to stop. You fear causing them that disappointment. Just the thought of their potential disappointment makes you worry. You don't want anyone to suffer disappointment because of your actions or inaction. So you keep on supporting them, caring for them, perhaps for this whole lifetime. This attitude of caring for and worrying about everyone, never tiring in your efforts, this is the hallmark of someone who is truly and effectively transforming their karma. And that, by the way, is also an essential quality of a saint. Loving everyone, caring for all sentient beings, never knowing fatigue. They never reach a point where they say, "Oh, I'm just too tired, I give up." That thought simply doesn't arise for them. The person who understands how to make merit in this deeply devoted, thorough, and profound manner, always seeing things through to their proper conclusion, that person is truly and visibly transforming their karma, bit by bit, day by day. From a not rich destiny, they will eventually become rich. We don't know precisely in which lifetime that transformation will fully manifest, but the more profound and thorough our heart is in these virtuous actions, the shorter the time it will take for positive changes to occur. Perhaps one individual might need 5 lifetimes of such dedicated effort to change from a poor to a rich destiny. But another person, practicing with greater intensity, sincerity, and wisdom, might only need 1 lifetime. In their very next life, they could be born with a rich destiny already established. Once I met a lady. I could perceive that she possessed a certain aura of luck about her, a kind of innate karmic propensity for good fortune. She didn't seem to be doing anything particularly extraordinary in her daily life, yet good things just seemed to happen to her frequently. She'd experienced this piece of good luck, that stroke of good fortune. Observing her, I could also tell she wasn't deeply versed in Buddhist teachings or formal practice. I was naturally curious, so I asked her, "Can you tell me, in your past, did you perhaps perform any particularly significant good deeds? Any acts of great and notable merit?" She thought for a moment and then replied, "Well, Venerable, thinking back, there was a time when I didn't have much money myself. But living next door to me, there was a little boy who desperately needed heart surgery. It was a very expensive operation, costing tens of millions, a sum his family simply couldn't afford. The doctors had said that if he didn't have the surgery, he would probably die within a few months. So, well, I just made a decision. I gathered up every single bit of money I had saved and gave it all to them so that little boy could have the operation. He had the surgery and thankfully he recovered. And, strangely enough, Venerable, ever since that time, I've had this continuous run of good luck in my life." So, you see, this is a clear case where the act of merit-making was exceptionally profound and thorough. It involved a truly immense personal sacrifice on her part, and it clearly came from a genuinely compassionate and selfless heart. And the result? It transformed her karma noticeably even within that very same lifetime, without her having to wait for future lives. She didn't suddenly become fabulously wealthy, but she clearly possessed what we call luck or good fortune. And having this good fortune means it becomes easier to acquire resources, and things generally tend to go more smoothly in one's life. Of course, later on, if she doesn't continue to cultivate such virtuous actions, that accumulated good fortune might gradually diminish over time. But by daring to perform that one incredibly selfless and compassionate act, this person took a significant step upwards in her karmic standing. If she hadn't done that, her whole life might have just been average, without any particular good fortune or notable positive events. But she dared to act once, decisively and with great heart, and since then, she's always had that discernible luck. So, the actual duration it takes for us to transform our destiny from poor to a rich destiny isn't fixed. It's not a set number of years or lifetimes. It depends entirely on our attitude, the state of our soul, the depth of our sincerity, our wisdom, and the sustained effort we put into virtuous actions. And there's one absolutely crucial detail that I always remind you of. When you make merit, when you perform good deeds, do not cling to the accomplishment. Do not become attached to the idea that you did a good deed or expect praise or reward. If you can cultivate this non-attachment, you'll find that you progress much faster on your path. But the person who makes merit and then immediately goes around telling everyone about it, or constantly replays it in their mind, patting themselves on the back internally, boasting either silently to themselves or openly to others, for such a person that merit diminishes very quickly. It's as if you're trying to step up a ladder towards wealth and nobility, but you can't quite make it. You take one step up and then you slide right back down. You take another step up, and you slide back down again. And all because you performed a good action and then you boasted about it. You clung to the sense of accomplishment. So the key is do good if, and then mentally let go of the feeling of, I did this wonderful thing. Then you can easily take a step, place your foot firmly, and move upwards. Take another step, place it firmly, and move upwards again. You won't keep slipping back down. But if we perform good deeds and then we show off, or if we cling to the merit even just silently within our own hearts, we'll still find ourselves in that frustrating cycle of stepping up and then sliding right back down in this world. We see in this world people who are incredibly, almost unbelievably rich. And, of course, we also see people who are so desperately poor that their existence is hardly different from that of animals, hungry one day, just barely fed the next, perhaps earning a mere pittance that's not even enough to buy food for that single day. There are so many different destinies, so many vast disparities. Now, you will find some social activists who harbor the noble dream of a world where all human beings are perfectly equal in every respect. That, however, will never happen. Why not? Because the karma of sentient beings is not the same. It hasn't been the same for countless past lifetimes. Their accumulated karmic imprints are all different. Their minds and mental capacities are different. The amount and type of merit they've made in the past are different. So how can you possibly force everyone to be perfectly equal? Therefore, never, ever entertain the idealistic notion of forcing everyone to have the exact same standard of living or the exact same amount of material assets. It will never work because in doing so, you're directly attempting to override the fundamental law of karma. So, with a degree of sober acceptance, we have to acknowledge a world that inherently possesses these disparities. The only truly effective thing we can do is try to alleviate the suffering caused by these disparities through the cultivation and application of morality and ethics. For those who are wealthy, we encourage them to try their very best to generously help those who are poor. For those who are poor, we encourage them to strive earnestly to cultivate themselves, to make merit through virtuous actions, and to contribute positively to society in whatever way they can. That's all we can realistically do. It's only through the consistent practice of morality and compassion that we can soothe the sharp edges of this inherent disparity between rich and poor that exists in the world. But to imagine that one can just take a knife and metaphorically slice everything up so that everyone becomes perfectly equal, that will never, ever work, because people's underlying karmic conditions simply aren't the same. Now, let's consider a scenario where someone already possesses a rich destiny. So we might ask, will they just automatically become rich without any effort? If they indeed have a rich destiny, there are generally two ways this can play out. The first scenario is this. Even with an underlying rich destiny, they still have to actively work, they still have to engage in business or some form of productive activity to actually become rich. If they don't make that effort, they won't become rich, despite their karmic potential. That's one type. The second scenario is quite different. They have a rich destiny, and they don't even need to work. Money just seems to flow to them automatically with little or no effort on their part. And if a person who falls into that second scenario, the one who doesn't need to work for money to come, if such a person also makes an effort to do business, to work diligently, then they will become even richer, much, much richer than they otherwise would have been, because this individual possesses an incredible abundance of positive past merit. So, when we say that someone has a destiny to become rich, it can manifest in these two distinct ways, correct? The first way, they still have to make a considerable effort, work hard, engage in business, and as a result of these efforts, they will become rich. If they don't engage in business or productive work, they won't get rich. That's the first case. The second case, they don't need to actively engage in business at all. They can just be living a relatively casual life, perhaps even just playing around, and then suddenly, out of the blue, their grandfather, or their father, or some distant uncle passes away and leaves them a legacy of several $1 million in inheritance. Just like that, completely unexpected. It's as if money has fallen directly from the sky. That's an example of someone who doesn't need to work but still becomes rich because their accumulated merit from past lives is so overwhelmingly abundant. And those people, the ones who already have an established rich destiny, who possess that inherent luck or good fortune, if they also make a conscious effort to engage in ethical business, and on top of that, make a dedicated effort to perform more good deeds, to accumulate even more merit, then later on in their lives, they will become incredibly, exceptionally wealthy. But now, let's consider another pertinent question. Suppose a person with a rich destiny falls into that first category. They are destined for wealth, but they have to work and engage in business to achieve it. Now, what if the business they choose to do is dishonest, unethical, or even illegal? Will they still become rich? The surprising answer is yes, for a time, they still will. I've told you a story before here in our community. There was a poor man who was seeking advice from various wealthy individuals on how to improve his financial situation. The first rich man he consulted said that he had made his fortune by playing the stock market. He just invested in stocks and he consistently made money. So, the poor man took his meager savings and put them into the stock market, and he lost every single penny. Then he went to another wealthy man who advised him, "You should get into land, real estate. That's where the real money is." A piece of land can unexpectedly skyrocket in value, increasing tenfold from what you originally paid. So, the poor man gathered all his remaining resources and poured his money into buying a piece of land. And then, wouldn't you know it, that particular piece of land got rezoned by the government for public use and he lost it. The compensation he received was perhaps only 1% of what he'd initially invested. He lost all his capital again. He had sought advice from these rich men on how to get rich. He had diligently followed their advice, and yet he only became poorer. Finally, in desperation, he asked another rich fellow, and this one candidly said, "Me? I get rich by stealing. If you want to get rich like me, come and steal with me." So he decided to follow that man and engage in theft. And after one of their illicit ventures, he got caught. The rich thief, being more experienced or perhaps just luckier, managed to escape, but our poor fellow couldn't. He was arrested and thrown in jail. Then the rich thief, to ensure his own safety, sent someone to threaten the incarcerated man, "If you dare to mention my name to the authorities, I'll arrange to have you killed in prison, or I'll have my family harm your wife and children." So, the poor man kept quiet. He didn't confess anything about his accomplice. And the rich thief, he just carried on his life outside, as cool as a cucumber, completely untouched by the law. He remained rich and he continued his life of crime. Why was this possible? Because his positive past karma, his accumulated merit, was still present, still actively potent and protecting him, at least for that time. So, it's a fact that a person whose merit from past lives is still intact and strong, sometimes, even if they engage in unscrupulous or unethical actions, can still appear to be rich and successful. Even if they engage in illegal business ventures, they can still prosper for a period. We have to remember this. Before our government authorities manage to apprehend those individuals involved in really significant criminal cases, who are these people typically? They're all major tycoons, prominent business figures, big shots, aren't they? It's often only when their supportive merit runs out, for whatever underlying karmic reason, that the government can finally gather enough evidence and opportunity to bring them to justice. And when they do, oh my goodness, all sorts of illegal and unethical activities are exposed. But before that point, while their positive past merit was still active and providing a kind of shield, they were engaged in these illegal activities, and yet they were still extremely successful, extremely wealthy. Positive past merit can be that formidable. It can temporarily cover up, it can shield a person's current mistakes and wrongdoings, allowing them to continue enjoying the fruits of wealth and status that their past karma has brought them. However, the very act of doing dishonest and illegal things will inevitably and inexorably diminish one's store of merit in some unseen, subtle way. And when that accumulated supportive merit is finally exhausted, then the law, the inevitable karmic consequences, will arrive very swiftly and surely. But while that positive merit is still present and potent, it often acts as a kind of shield, obscuring their wrongdoings from external scrutiny. It's only when the merit is completely depleted that the investigating authorities find they have enough grounds, enough connecting factors, enough favorable conditions to successfully prosecute and arrest them. While the merit is still strong, it often seems that nothing can touch them. It's a very strange yet observable phenomenon. Therefore, when we truly understand the workings of karma, when we understand ethics and morality, we should consciously endeavor to build a rich destiny for ourselves, but always in a wholesome and ethical way. And what does that mean, practically speaking? It means making merit, performing virtuous deeds in a way that is consistently very profound, very thorough, and very devoted. If we just perform good deeds in an ordinary, superficial way, then to become genuinely rich through wholesome and ethical means, the degree of difficulty, the amount of virtue, wisdom, and sustained effort required is perhaps 1,000 times greater than that involved in just ordinary, casual, or superficial merit-making. And then, to aspire to become a saint, oh, I am sorry to say, the difficulty of making the kind of extraordinarily pure and vast merit required for sainthood is perhaps 1,000,000 times greater still. This is because a true saint embodies within themselves all the accumulated merit of a truly wealthy person, in the most virtuous and generous sense of wealth. And then vastly, immeasurably more on top of that. That's how profoundly difficult, how challenging the path to sainthood is. Each of us should take a moment for honest self-reflection. Do we currently possess the destiny to become a saint? You know, many of us may have accumulated more merit than other people. Perhaps enough to have the destiny to become a monk, or the destiny to become a nun. That is a significant karmic attainment in itself. But that doesn't automatically mean we also possess the destiny to attain the path, to achieve full and irreversible enlightenment. You can certainly get ordained, and that is a meritorious step. But don't you dare dream of easily attaining the path if you don't yet have that profound, underlying karmic predisposition for sainthood. Having the destiny to be a monastic simply means you have accumulated enough specific merit to enable you to enter a temple, to have your head shaved, to wear the robes. That's your current destiny fulfilled up to that particular point. That's the limit of that specific karmic allotment for now. To demand or expect more beyond that, without further intensive cultivation and the creation of new causes, well, it's not going to spontaneously happen. So, the real pressing issue for a dedicated practitioner is to consciously create for oneself the destiny to become a saint. And that destiny to become a saint, I will say it again for emphasis, is 1,000,000 times harder to cultivate than the mere destiny to be rich. The kind of effort required for ordinary wealth needs a certain depth and consistency. The kind of effort, sincerity, and wisdom required for sainthood demands a profundity that is vastly greater, almost beyond comparison. For example, as I mentioned earlier, the person who gives alms but fails to achieve a rich destiny is typically the one who sees a poor person and just casually instructs, "Oh son, go give them 5 liters of rice," and then pays no more attention to the matter. There is an act of giving, yes, a physical transaction, but that person will likely never achieve a rich destiny because their mind of giving, their intention is superficial, perfunctory, lacking deep engagement. Now contrast that with someone who is actively cultivating a rich destiny through their actions. They also arrange for 5 liters of rice to be given. But afterwards, in their heart, they continue to ponder with genuine concern after they finish consuming these 5 liters of rice. What will they live on next? Is there anything else I can possibly do to help them further? Perhaps their actual material capacity at that moment is indeed limited to giving only those 5 liters of rice. They physically can't give more. But in their heart, they never mentally abandon that person in need. That person is successfully cultivating the destiny of wealth because their heart possesses a far greater and more sustained sense of responsibility. The other individual also performed an act of almsgiving, but their giving was superficial and not followed through with continued concern in a way despite the physical act of giving. They were still being irresponsible towards the long-term welfare of the needy individual. That's precisely why, even with their acts of giving, they don't fundamentally change their fate from poor to rich. But the one who gives 5 liters of rice and whose mind, whose compassionate concern, never really leaves that person, who feels a continued active responsibility, that person truly has the destiny of wealth taking root, even if the initial material act of giving was also just 5 liters of rice. And now, let us consider the person who possesses or is cultivating the destiny to become a saint. They also might give 5 liters of rice to someone in need. But in their heart, their love and compassion for that person are immense, boundless. They think not just about the immediate material need, but about that person's entire karmic situation, their past lives, their future lives. They ponder deeply how to create the optimal conditions for that person to learn to make merit themselves, so that they can rise up and improve their own circumstances through their own efforts. They think about how to help that person ultimately escape the whole relentless cycle of suffering and rebirth. The spirit of responsibility that a true saint possesses when helping sentient beings is ultimate. It's incredibly thorough, it's profound, and their love is extraordinary, almost beyond our normal human comprehension. I often tell you, my disciples, that you might practice meditation on loving-kindness, what we call metabhavana, for 5 years. Perhaps even for 10 years, and then, maybe then, you'll begin to have a little tiny spark of genuine, unconditional loving-kindness arise in your heart. When you first start this practice, let's be perfectly honest with ourselves. Nobody really loves everyone in that deep, selfless, unconditional way that defines true metta. Often you just say the words. You go through the mental motions daily, hoping for the best. But after 5 or 10 years of persistent, dedicated practice, a tiny little bit of true loving-kindness does start to flicker into existence within your heart. That, my dear friends, is a tangible trace of sainthood beginning to emerge. Just a tiny bit, but it's real. And when you then interact with other people, that nascent loving-kindness will gradually, subtly begin to manifest in your words and actions. If you continue with that same profundity, that same unwavering dedication to this practice for another 20 years, or 30 years, or even 40 years, then your love will become truly abundant, incredibly profound, and your mind will eventually be characterized by nothing but a mind of pure, unadulterated love. Loving everyone, loving all sentient beings without distinction. Loving naturally, deeply, thoroughly, and profoundly. It will simply become your natural state of being. But please remember, in those first 5 or 10 years of practice, there's not much tangible result there yet, you know. And if you don't persist, if you don't make the sustained effort, it'll likely be a complete failure in cultivating this quality. Your heart will remain as dry and barren as a bone. So, it is possible for people to engage in spiritual practices for many years, but if they don't specifically and diligently cultivate loving-kindness, if they don't actively compel themselves to open their hearts and learn to love, then even after 40 years of so-called practice, they still may not know how to truly love anyone. Naturally, when such a person dies, their spiritual trajectory will be downwards. They can never ascend to higher states with such a heart. Now, what is the absolute key, the most profound secret to transforming an ordinary person into someone who possesses the destiny to become a saint? What is it fundamentally? I have said this quite literally 1,000,000 times before, but it is so crucial that it bears repeating again and again. First, one must cultivate deep, unwavering, and heartfelt reverence for the Buddha. Second, one must develop all-encompassing compassion, which includes both loving kindness or metta and empathetic sorrow for the suffering of others or karuna. Third, one must practice profound humility. That's essentially it. On New Year's Eve, I intend to elaborate on another factor that is closely related to these. This quality of humility, where does it truly come from? It arises from a practice of deep, sincere, and ongoing repentance for all past misdeeds and unskillful actions. I was actually planning that if we are able to hold the Ulambana festival, our traditional 7th-month observance for departed ancestors, this year, I would give a dedicated sermon on the perfection of repentance, or Samhoi Paramitha as it's known. But I have some concerns that with the current pandemic situation, we might not be able to organize such a large gathering. In any case, the practice of repentance that is truly thorough, consistently profound, absolutely ultimate in its sincerity, and radically honest with oneself, this is an exceptionally excellent and powerful practice undertaken by all the great saints. But to effectively sow the seeds for future sainthood, these 3 qualities are the absolutely essential factors, the 3 core mental attitudes, the 3 indispensable heart practices that we must intentionally cultivate. This means making a conscious determination in our hearts every single day when we sit for meditation. For several years now, you, my disciples, have been making these intentions, haven't you? Yet, if we are honest, there's hardly been any significant stirring, any noticeable deep change, has there? Why is that? It's because, for the most part, our efforts have been too superficial. You say that you revere the Buddha, but to what actual extent do you truly revere the Buddha, the Arhats, the Bodhisattvas? If you examine your heart, it's still very superficial, isn't it? You say you're cultivating loving kindness, but when you look closely at the quality of that cultivation, it's not yet truly profound. You haven't contemplated it deeply enough, you haven't worked with it patiently and persistently enough. You talk about practicing humility, but again, if you are honest, it's not yet thorough, not yet deeply ingrained in your character. It's precisely because these three fundamental mental qualities, these crucial heart practices, are not cultivated with sufficient diligence, depth, and profundity that the genuine essence of sainthood doesn't gradually begin to manifest within us. If these three heart practices were to be cultivated with real, sustained diligence and profound sincerity, the saintly essence would surely begin to appear. And it's not just a matter of cultivating these three essential qualities only at the beginning of a formal meditation session. Later on, when I deliver the sermon on the third part of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, known as Tu Nim Su, I will elaborate on this much further. Do you all remember the Gatha, the verse that I taught you for entering meditation? This body is not I, this mind is not I, there is nothing that is truly I. In every in-breath, in every out-breath, with all my heart, I revere the Buddha. I have instructed every one of you when you begin your meditation to recite this verse. You recite it, and then what typically happens? You forget it almost immediately. You don't really know how to actually apply its profound meaning within the core of your meditation technique. The meditation technique itself, most schools of practice, many traditions worldwide, utilize the breath as the primary object to enter meditative states. This is because it's generally considered a superior technique, an excellent and readily available tool. Even today, in the modern West, in their physical fitness regimes and various sports training programs, they also apply principles of controlled breathing. The breath is truly a wondrous and mysterious thing. It's an important technique. But no matter how good it is, no matter how effective it can be, it's still fundamentally just a technique. And that technique has many intricate layers, many levels of subtlety and depth. Initially, when we first start practicing, we all remember this basic instruction: breathing in. I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. The Buddha certainly taught this as a foundational step. But that's only the very beginning of the practice. The technique doesn't remain just like that, at that superficial level, forever. As you go deeper and deeper into the practice, the breath itself, when properly understood and utilized, can open up an entire path to liberation for you. How so, you ask? Well, I won't analyze that in great detail today. We'll wait until New Year's Eve, and I'll speak about it much more thoroughly then. It relates closely to advanced stages of meditation, so I'll discuss it in greater depth at that appropriate time. But the crucial point here is this: no matter how good the technique is, it's still, at its core, just a technique. To truly practice the Dharma, to realize the path to enlightenment, to become a saint, what do we need beyond mere technique? We absolutely need Dharma principles, the profound truths, the ethical guidelines, and the liberating wisdom of the Buddhist teachings. These Dharma principles must accompany the technique. They must be integrated with it. Technique alone, technique practiced in isolation without these guiding principles, will not make one a saint. Please understand this clearly. It might, at best, help you attain certain states of deep meditative absorption, what we call chung tien. That's why the Buddha explicitly taught that attaining meditative absorption is quite different from attaining sainthood or chung tan, which signifies full spiritual realization and liberation. So now, if thanks to diligent application of the breath technique, we manage to attain a state of deep concentration, that's only achieving meditative absorption. It's only when, in every single breath we take, there are profound Dharma principles accompanying that breath, fully integrated into our awareness and intention, that we will later have the capacity to attain true sainthood. That's precisely the idea I embedded in that little verse I taught you: in every in-breath, in every out-breath, with all my heart, I revere the Buddha. I didn't make the verse too long or overly complex, fearing it would cause distraction for beginners. I just embedded that fundamental guiding principle for everyone to cultivate intentionally. But still, many people forget to apply it deeply and consistently. However, in the upcoming sermon on the third part of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, I will explain very clearly how the Buddha himself taught this in the past, how in every phase of the breath, the Buddha masterfully and skillfully embedded profound Dharma principles. Because the breath, no matter how special or useful it may be, is still, in the end, just a technique. And the way the Buddha integrated Dharma principles alongside that technique is truly brilliant, a mark of his supreme wisdom. Because, let's face it, who can possibly teach better or more profoundly than the Buddha himself? So here, when it comes right down to it, in order to build our essential saintly qualities, No matter what else we say or do, it still fundamentally comes down to those 3 core mental qualities, those indispensable heart practices I mentioned earlier. Those are the 3 that truly create within us the very essence of sainthood. And when that saintly essence is genuinely present and growing in our hearts, then our facial expression, our entire life, our attitude towards others, our personal demeanor, our very presence in the world, everything begins to change, gradually, bit by bit, transforming from the inside out. And the truly important, indispensable element underlying all of this is what we call merit, the accumulated positive karmic fruit of countless good deeds. Merit, in this context, means genuinely benefiting sentient beings, benefiting the world at large with wisdom and compassion. The depth of love, compassion, wisdom, and unwavering responsible action required for this path to sainthood is, as I said, perhaps 1,000,000 times greater than what a person might do merely to become materially rich. It involves being incredibly profound in one's understanding, loving with great wisdom and non-attachment, being meticulous and ethical in all one's actions, and possessing an extremely deep and unshakable sense of responsibility towards the world and all its inhabitants. Therefore, what I personally fear most are those practitioners who adopt a misguided attitude of attempting to not let anything trouble their minds, to the point where they become irresponsible, detached in a cold, indifferent way. Don't you ever think that such a person will become a saint? Because a true saint is someone who is always responsible for the world. In fact, they are super responsible, not just moderately so. This whole world, in a very real sense, is held within their compassionate heart. How many billions of human beings are embraced within their boundless loving concern? How many billions upon billions of animals and other sentient beings are held within their all-encompassing loving embrace? Every forest, every drifting cloud, every gust of wind, every flowing river, all of life in its myriad forms, everything is contained within their loving heart. That person is extremely, ultimately responsible, and that is an absolutely essential quality for sainthood. But the person who chooses a path of spiritual practice where they try to abandon everything to become indifferent to the world's problems and the suffering of others, without first cultivating this profound, active compassion and unwavering sense of responsibility, well, if they happen to possess some significant past merit, they might be able to practice for a while, their mind might even become peaceful for a certain period, long enough perhaps to exhaust that store of past merit. And then what happens? They'll likely become agitated and confused again because they don't possess the true, resilient, saintly essence. Their spirit of responsibility is not ultimate, not limitless, not deeply ingrained. Remember this well, among the many defining factors and qualities of a true saint, one absolutely crucial element is that their spirit of responsibility is infinite, boundless. So, if we live irresponsibly, if we shirk our duties and obligations to others and to the world, then I am sorry to say we are not saints, nor are we genuinely on the path to becoming one. And if we possess very little sense of responsibility in our lives, then we are, for all intents and purposes, just ordinary, often selfish worldlings. So, simply by looking at our own prevailing spirit of responsibility, or lack thereof, we can accurately gauge the current level of our saintly essence. There are many contributing factors to sainthood, of course, but among them, the spirit of responsibility of a saint is truly immense and indispensable. Human beings differ significantly in their spiritual stature, in their accumulated meritorious conditions, and also, very importantly, in their inherent spirit of responsibility. A person who possesses a high and noble spirit of responsibility will gradually, almost naturally, find themselves rising to a high spiritual level. So, we speak about the importance of reverence for the Buddha, about cultivating compassion, about practicing humility. Then I often speak about the necessity of accumulating merit. And when we talk about accumulating merit, it inevitably relates to and is inseparable from a core ethical quality: the spirit of responsibility. Responsibility towards whom, you might ask? It means genuinely caring for those immediately around us, our families, our communities. And it extends even further to caring for and feeling concern for places and beings far beyond where our physical hands can currently reach. Yet, our heart still cares, still loves, still thinks about them with compassion. The heart of a true saint is that vast, that expansive, without any artificial limits or boundaries. and of course, to make genuine progress on the path to sainthood, when performing good deeds. When accumulating merit, one must absolutely not cling to the accomplishment. If you perform a good deed and then you cling to that sense of "I did this wonderful thing," you immediately lose, or at least significantly diminish, the developing saintly essence within you. That consistent practice of non-attachment is the vital secret, the crucial factor, the absolutely indispensable condition for spiritual growth. So, this brings us to the big question that many people ask: when will one finally attain the path to enlightenment? Honestly, I have no idea. I don't know how many lifetimes it will ultimately take. I truly, genuinely don't. But here's what I do know: if you are on the right path, then you can be at ease in your heart. You can have a sense of confidence in your journey. But then, the next question naturally arises. How do you know if you are actually on the right path? Well, to know if you are on the right path or not, to reach that state of genuine, unshakable peace of mind, you have to first reach the very gate of the Buddha Dharma, that is, the true entry point to the Buddha's liberating teachings. When you finally get there, you will know it yourself intuitively and directly, and you will feel an unshakable inner security, a profound sense of recognition. Ah, this is my true spiritual home. Once you're standing at that gate, all that truly remains is to take the final step inside. But getting from standing at the gate to actually stepping fully inside the house of the Dharma, that's another significant part of the journey, involving further purification and ripening of conditions. However, once you have genuinely reached the gate of the house, you already feel that profound security, that deep inner ease. Now, I can anticipate your next question, but Master, how do I know if I've actually reached the gate of this house? Well, for that, you'll have to patiently wait until New Year's Eve. And I'll say more about it then. Goodness me, it seems that on New Year's Eve, I'm constantly making announcements and advertising upcoming sermons, rather like a marketing manager. But truly, when you stand before the gate of the true Dharma house, you will know it yourself instantly and unmistakably. You'll feel an immediate sense of profound peace and unshakable security. This is unequivocally home. Then, whether you happen to die in that lifetime and are reborn, whatever circumstances may arise, you will know with certainty that this is the place, this is your path. You won't be afraid or lost anymore. Whether you are able to fully enter the house in that particular lifetime or not becomes a matter of other karmic conditions. A question of dependent origination continuing to unfold. The most frightening scenario is to be wandering aimlessly in your spiritual practice and then to delude yourself by prematurely concluding, "Oh, wonderful, I have arrived home." And if someone then asks you, "How do you know you've arrived home?" you might reply with misplaced confidence, "Oh, because my mind is completely empty, wonderfully clear and perfectly tranquil." I am sorry to tell you, my dear friend, but that's not necessarily it. That experience of emptiness or tranquility, while it can be a positive sign, is often just a temporary meditative state. It's nothing definitive or ultimate in itself. So many people make the critical mistake. They get stuck at that very point. They experience a mind that is empty and tranquil, and they mistakenly believe they've reached home, that they've attained sainthood. No, that's not it. That place, that state of mere emptiness or tranquility, if it's without profound wisdom and compassion, can become a very subtle spiritual trap, a place where many millions of sentient beings can get terribly stuck. And one can remain stuck there for, who knows, maybe even for thousands of lifetimes. That's not the ultimate destination. It's not yet the true door, not yet the actual gateway to enter the real house of the Dharma. So, if a merely tranquil mind isn't the gateway, then what is? Where, then, does that elusive gateway lie? Well, as I said, come New Year's Eve, you will hear more. We will explore and share these ideas together then. If the mind is tranquil, where is the real gateway to liberation to be found? At that time, with further explanation, you will come to know. Similarly, when we discuss the process of becoming a saint, I also tend to divide it into two general types or scenarios based on one's karmic conditions. One type is this: you already possess the sufficiently ripened destiny to become a saint from past cultivation. And then, in this current life, you still have to practice very arduously, with great and sustained effort, to finally attain the path, to achieve full and irreversible spiritual realization. Another type is quite different. You possess such an overwhelmingly powerful and mature destiny to become a saint, built up from countless past lifetimes of dedicated effort, that in this present life, perhaps you're just going about your daily business, seemingly living an ordinary life, maybe even appearing to be just playing around, and then suddenly, due to some profound karmic connection ripening at precisely the right moment, you unexpectedly attain the path, just like that, almost out of the blue. It's a very strange phenomenon. But it does happen. There are many such accounts in Buddhist history. For example, we hear stories from the time of the Buddha himself. There was a certain high-ranking official, a general in the army who was experiencing deep anguish and grief because his beloved consort had recently died. He happened to meet the Buddha, and the Buddha, perceiving his state of mind, uttered a single, pithy verse of Dharma. Upon hearing that verse, the general attained arhatship, full enlightenment, right there on the spot. Then, in that very moment of profound realization, he entered into a deep meditative state known as the fire kasina samadhi, a meditative absorption focusing on the fire element. His physical body spontaneously self-immolated, and he entered parinirvana, the final nirvana beyond death. He probably didn't wish to ordain as a monk at that particular point. For him, the choice was clear: either become a bhikkhu, a monk, or enter nirvana immediately. He chose the path of immediate nirvana. And to enter nirvana at that very moment, he entered the profound fire meditation, and his body just burst into flames and was consumed. Or let us consider the well-known story of the bhikkhuni, the nun named Kema. She was a queen, renowned for her great beauty, and had not engaged in much formal spiritual practice at all prior to meeting the Buddha. Yet, after listening to just one Dharma talk delivered by the Buddha, she attained arhatship immediately. After her profound attainment, the Buddha also presented her with two paths. 1, to enter nirvana at that very moment. 2, to ordain as a nun and continue to serve the Dharma. King Bimbisara, who was her husband, pleaded with the Buddha, "Oh, blessed one, please let her ordain," because to him, her entering nirvana at that point simply meant death, which was too painful for him to bear. So he earnestly requested that she be allowed to ordain. She then became a bhikkhuni and rose to become a foremost leader within the Bhikkhuni Sangha, the community of nuns, celebrated for her extreme wisdom and exceptional capabilities. Those are illustrative cases where the accumulated past merit is so immense. They attain profound realization. But for all of us, what then? For most of us, it means that we have to practice very, very arduously, and then maybe, eventually, with continued effort. This is because most of us do not yet possess that fully ripened, overwhelmingly powerful destiny to become a saint. Therefore, the truly important and pressing task for us is to actively create for ourselves that destiny to become a saint, to diligently cultivate all the necessary causes and conditions. And that destiny to become a saint is something that requires an exceedingly profound level of ethical conduct and exemplary character, and an absolutely terrifyingly immense accumulation of merit and virtue. I often use a simple analogy to illustrate this point. You know when the jackfruit tree bears its fruit, or when the mango tree in your garden bears its fruit, don't you? An ordinary person, when they look at such a tree, they usually just focus on the fruit. They only really know the fruit because that's the part they harvest and eat, right? They don't typically eat the leaves or the branches of the tree. They eat the fruit. So they only know the fruit and they only talk about the fruit. It's just like when people talk about the fruits of the spiritual path. They tend to only talk about the attainments, the results, the enlightenment experiences. But please excuse me for pointing this out. If there isn't a very large, very strong, and healthy tree with deep roots, a sturdy trunk, lush, spreading branches, and an abundance of green leaves, there will never, ever be any fruit. Similarly, many people in the world today only talk about meditation, about achieving spiritual results, about attaining the fruits of sainthood. But I tell you truly, if there isn't an entire, well-established, and diligently cultivated system of merit, virtuous character, and ethical conduct built up beforehand as a solid foundation, then don't you ever dare to dream that the fruits of sainthood will just magically appear out of nowhere. And the part of the process that involves formal meditation, attaining states of meditative absorption, even attaining full sainthood, when you look at the whole vast picture of spiritual development, its actual proportion is just a relatively small part of the entire endeavor. The crucial preparation that comes beforehand, that whole massive, Deeply rooted tree, the strong, resilient trunk, the widely spreading branches, the countless vibrant leaves, all of that represents the vast and indispensable system of ethics, virtuous character, and accumulated merit that must precede any true spiritual fruition. That is the major part, the absolutely essential foundation. That's the very reason why, for the past 30, perhaps even 40 years, I have constantly and consistently been teaching about what? About ethics, about character development, about the right way to live a wholesome life, about how to effectively make merit. It's all been about planting that precious spiritual tree within each of you, about helping that tree to grow very large, very strong, with abundant leaves, with vibrant green, lushly spreading branches, so that when it finally comes time for that tree to bear its destined fruit, the fruit will be magnificent, abundant, and nourishing. And countless sentient beings will be able to come and eat from it and be truly nourished and benefited. For example, if a tree is still young and relatively small, and you try to force it to bear fruit prematurely, what will happen? The fruit will inevitably be meager, perhaps only 1 or 2 people can get a little something from it, and then the tree itself, whose depth of ethics and character is relatively small and undeveloped, well, maybe they'll manage to attain some partial realization primarily for their own benefit. They might be able to teach a few Dharma talks to a handful of people, and then they'll enter nirvana and be gone from this world. And what about the rest of sentient beings? They're left adrift again, still lost, still searching. But if there is a saint who is like a great, ancient, and deeply rooted tree, whose accumulated merit is vast, whose ethical conduct is profound and unwavering, whose positive influence is widespread and enduring, when their magnificent tree bears fruit, then countless birds, animals, and human beings from all directions will come and joyfully partake of the fruits of that great being. The benefit to the world from such a saint will be immense, profound, and far-reaching. This is what I truly dream of for all of you, my beloved disciples. That each one of you endeavors to become a great Bodhi tree, a true great tree of enlightenment with a spiritual trunk that is truly massive and deeply rooted. A tree that stands incredibly tall and strong, with branches and leaves that are lush, abundant, vibrant, and deeply green. A tree that is so magnificent that it is visible and offers shade even from a great distance, not one that you only notice when you get right up close to it. Then, when the time and conditions are perfectly ripe, when the proper season arrives for that magnificent tree to blossom and bear its destined fruit, then an entire province, perhaps even an entire region, could come and eat from its abundance, and still not exhaust the bounteous fruit on that single tree. That means that countless sentient beings, for many, many generations to come, not just in this present life, but for many, many future lives, will still be able to derive immense benefit from your saintly fruit, from your profound realization. That's precisely why I invest so much time and energy, why I've given so many countless sermons. I don't even know the exact number by now. Perhaps it's nearing 2,000 sermons? Maybe not quite that many yet. Talking about all sorts of things, about every single detail of the path, as if I were meticulously describing every single leaf on that vast spiritual tree. Each leaf, each detail is like a sermon, helping to fill out and complete that entire magnificent, vibrant green tree of your spiritual potential bit by bit, tiny detail by tiny detail, growing patiently little by little. It's all done with the sole intention of helping to create within each of you a great and fruitful Bodhi tree. And inevitably, one day I, your teacher, will also have to depart from this world. When that time comes, if each of you has successfully cultivated yourselves into a great Bodhi tree, then when your season arrives and your tree bears its magnificent fruit of wisdom and compassion, this entire planet, all its sentient beings, will derive immense benefit from your attainment. You must understand the path in this profound and far-reaching way. So, please, I implore you, don't be in an excessive hurry. Don't be too impatient to try and force the fruit of attainment to appear prematurely on your spiritual tree. Why? Because your tree is not yet large enough, not yet strong enough, not yet deeply rooted enough. Don't be overly eager to have spiritual fruit too soon. So many people in this world today want to have spiritual fruit quickly. They hear someone say, "Oh, if you practice that particular method over there, you'll attain enlightenment very, very quickly." And off they rush, so incredibly eager to get that alluring early fruit. All the while their own foundational tree of virtue and wisdom is not yet tall, not yet strong. If the tree isn't yet tall and robust, then even if you practice diligently, yes, it's true. Your mind might become peaceful for a while. You might even attain some states of deep concentration. It's not that you won't experience these things. You might experience this pleasant meditative state or that blissful spiritual state, and it feels absolutely wonderful at the time. But then what happens? After a while, it's all gone. It simply disappears. The underlying merit that supported that temporary state becomes exhausted, and that particular attainment, that pleasant state, is gone too. There are so very many people like that in the world. So many. They come up here to the temple and they tell me their stories. Venerable, I've been to so many different places. I've practiced in so many diverse Dharma centers. I've traveled from Sri Lanka to Myanmar to Thailand. I've sat in intensive retreats with all of them, with renowned masters. I just look at them. I understand their situation and I just smile gently and ask, and so, how's your practice now? And they often reply with a sigh, well, Venerable, before, I used to be very peaceful. I had many profound experiences, but now it's all gone. And I just smile again with compassion. Because that's the rule, that's simply the way it works when the foundation is not solid. The rule is that the peace we attain in meditation, if it's not based on a deep and solid foundation of accumulated virtue and wisdom, is not permanent. It will inevitably be lost when our supportive store of merit is exhausted. Their spiritual tree was too small, too young, yet they rushed and tried to force it to bear fruit prematurely. The fruit that appeared was consequently tiny, perhaps even inedible or spiritually unripened, and then it just shriveled up and fell off. And sometimes the little tree itself withered and weakened from the effort. Such a profound waste of potential. Once, there was a certain nun whom I knew. She had gone to Myanmar to engage in intensive meditation practice. When she came back, she was boasting quite a lot about all sorts of attainments and experiences she had achieved. She also mentioned that there was another practitioner at that center who had even developed remarkable psychic powers. So, I naturally asked her, and for how long did that person possess these psychic powers? She replied, oh, they had them for about 3 years and then eventually they were lost. This means that they attained a certain level of concentration, they developed these psychic powers as a byproduct, and then after just 3 short years it was all gone. There are many such cases. Why does this happen? It's because the foundational tree of their overall spiritual development isn't mature enough yet. It's not yet an ancient, deeply rooted and resilient tree. The lifespan of that particular attainment, that particular fruit, is consequently not long. So, we must all strive to become a spiritual tree whose lifespan is like 1,000 years. A tree that grows to be unimaginably vast and tall. Then, whenever its natural season comes to bear fruit, innumerable sentient beings from all walks of life will be able to come and pick from its branches, eat from its bounty, and derive immense and lasting benefit. And there's this other thing that's truly rather frightening, something we really need to be deeply aware of as practitioners. Earlier, we used the example of the person who possessed the destiny of wealth. Even when he was engaged in stealing, he was still rich and successful. As long as his positive past karma hadn't completely run out, he was still, in a worldly sense, successful. It was only when his supportive merit was finally exhausted that he got caught and faced the consequences. But while his merit remained potent, he was still rich. So, in a somewhat similar, though spiritually more consequential way, a person who possesses the profound destiny to attain the path, and here, I sincerely hope I'm not hitting a raw nerve with anyone listening. Please don't be upset or offended by this. Even if such a person practices incorrectly in this lifetime, they can still attain the path. Even if they practice superficially, they can still attain the path. Now, this particular phenomenon, this possibility, is where the real calamity, the genuine danger for the future of Buddhism lies. They might be practicing wrongly, according to conventional understanding, yet they attain genuine realization. I've personally encountered this many times over the years. You might hear about their particular way of practice. And when you examine it, you see that they seem to have no proper or systematic foundation whatsoever, yet they clearly attain authentic realization. They understand deep meditative states. They comprehend various spiritual realms, and when they speak about these profound matters, they don't make mistakes. Their understanding is genuine. But their overt method of practice in this life might be quite incorrect or incomplete, yet they still attain. Practicing superficially, they attain. Practicing wrongly, they attain. And this This is the potential disaster for the Buddha Dharma. Wherein lies the disaster? It's that they then often go on to teach others. And because their own path was idiosyncratic and reliant on immense past karma rather than sound methodology in this life, they may teach others the wrong way, thereby misleading entire generations of sincere practitioners. It's just like asking that highly successful thief for advice on how to get rich. Just follow my example and engage in theft, and you'll get rich just like me. But if we, lacking his specific karmic luck or protection, follow him and go stealing, what happens? We get caught almost immediately. He, with his remaining past merit, still manages to escape, and we, perhaps not daring to expose him or simply being less fortunate, end up taking the fall and suffering the full punishment. It's precisely the same in spiritual practice. You might see someone who has apparently attained the path through their practice. You come to trust them completely. You observe their character, their wisdom, perhaps even some display of psychic powers, and it all seems so wonderful, so inspiring. So, whatever they teach, you tend to believe it implicitly without question. But if you then try to practice according to their potentially flawed or incomplete method, a method that worked for them only because of their unique and powerful past karmic conditions, and you subsequently go spiritually crazy or run into serious, intractable problems in your own practice, well, in that case, you really only have yourself to blame. They won't suffer any negative consequences for your difficulties because they've already attained their goal. Since they've attained however they happen to practice in this life, it ultimately worked for them. But if we try to blindly imitate them to exactly follow their specific, perhaps unconventional path without possessing the same underlying karmic ripeness, we can easily go astray, sometimes with devastating consequences. It's just like following that other unfortunate fellow to go stealing. We get caught immediately while the instigator, still protected by his remaining good karma, walks away free. What I personally fear most in the context of the Dharma are those individuals who possess this exceptionally powerful past merit for sainthood, then practice superficially or even incorrectly in this present life, yet still attain realization due to that past momentum, and then subsequently go on to transmit that same superficiality, to teach that same erroneous or incomplete method to others. Imagine how many future generations of sincere Buddhist practitioners will decline and be led astray because of the influence of these well-intentioned but methodologically flawed individuals. Why is this so dangerous for most of us? Because we, the vast majority of ordinary practitioners, don't possess that same extraordinary, overwhelming destiny for sainthood that such a uniquely conditioned person might possess. We need a very fundamental, very sound, and entirely reliable path. That person, if they were truly wise and compassionate in their teaching, should be guiding us from the very basics, instructing us on how to transform ourselves from having an ordinary person's destiny to first diligently cultivating the genuine destiny for sainthood through correct and sustained effort. And then, regarding specific techniques, they should also teach systematically, starting from simple, foundational techniques and gradually leading to more advanced ones, step by meticulous step. Just as I explained earlier with the example of breath meditation. The breath, for example, the initial instruction is often, breathing in, know you're breathing in, breathing out, know you're breathing out. Don't interfere with it. That's just the most basic starting point. Then one must learn to go deeper and deeper, to understand how the breath really works in conjunction with the mind and body. It's not as simple as just breathing in and out and then, presto, you'll attain enlightenment. If your teacher tells you, "Oh, my son, I just focused on breathing in and breathing out, just breathing in and breathing out, and look, now I've attained enlightenment," and you, hearing that seemingly simple instruction, try to do exactly the same thing, well, you could diligently practice that for 100 lifetimes and you likely wouldn't budge a spiritual inch. You wouldn't attain anything significant at all. He may have practiced superficially in this life and attained, but that was only because of his unique prior causes and conditions. But if you just follow his superficial instruction from this life without building your own profound foundation, you could waste 100 precious lifetimes and get absolutely nowhere. All because you don't yet possess that same fully ripened destiny for sainthood. That's what is so frightening, so potentially dangerous, about uncritically following teachers whose paths may not be suitable for us. So, it is essential that we not only possess the destiny for sainthood, or are diligently and wisely cultivating it, And please, we must also ensure that we practice correctly, according to the true and complete Dharma. Why is this so important? Because we also have a profound responsibility. We may one day have to teach and guide those sincere practitioners who come after us. You know, sometimes in spiritual history, that truly exceptional individual might even take a sacred Buddha statue and burn it, and through that shocking, iconoclastic act, combined with their already profound inner state of realization, they might attain final enlightenment. But if we, as ordinary, unawakened individuals, were to take a Buddha statue and burn it, what would happen to us? We would go straight to the deepest hells for such a sacrilegious act. If we try to blindly follow those kinds of extreme, idiosyncratic, and unskillful examples from history, we're just setting ourselves up for utter spiritual disaster. And that is a very, very serious concern for anyone on the spiritual path. People who find it relatively easy to practice, or easy to attain some level of realization in this life. Again, this is almost always because of their strong and ripened past karma can, paradoxically, become a great danger, a potential calamity for the future of Buddhism if they are not extremely careful and wise in how they teach. I am very, very scared of this possibility. If you carefully reread the life stories and teachings of some of the great Zen masters of the past, you'll encounter that kind of highly unconventional, often shocking approach quite frequently. They often found it easy to practice, easy to awaken, because their past karmic conditions were so incredibly ripe. And after their awakening, they might say or do all sorts of outrageous, seemingly illogical or paradoxical things, and it's perfectly fine for them. It's simply a spontaneous expression of their profound, liberated realization. But if we, without that same depth of realization, try to imitate their external words or actions, we'll just end up going completely crazy, spiritually and mentally disoriented. So, what we truly need in the world today are dedicated teachers and practitioners who are deeply committed to following the correct and complete Noble Eightfold Path as taught by the Buddha, right from the very beginning of their spiritual journey. This always starts with right view, known in Pali as samadhi, understanding correctly, understanding cause and effect, understanding the intricate workings of karma, understanding merit and demerit, understanding these profound truths in an extremely deep, thorough, and nuanced way. We must endeavor to practice from a very solid, very carefully established ethical and intellectual foundation. This is especially true because we also have a potential responsibility to teach and guide other sincere seekers in the future. If we just try to rush ahead impatiently and focus only on getting attainments, yes, we might indeed attain something, some temporary state or experience. But later on, if we presume to teach others based on such a shaky foundation, we might very well end up teaching incorrectly, teaching superficially, or teaching actual errors, and thereby spiritually killing off the precious potential of how many countless future generations of practitioners. This can happen because we might write books, we might give Dharma talks. People might record our words, and these teachings then get transmitted far and wide, potentially harming countless sincere individuals for many years to come. So, you see, there are indeed many Buddhist books available in the world today. Many books on meditation and various spiritual paths. But, as you know, I don't generally allow you, my direct disciples, to just read whatever you want indiscriminately from these sources. That's the primary reason why. I often don't know how that particular author teaches, or what actual level of realization they've truly reached. Maybe they've attained something significant, some genuine level of insight. But it's by no means certain that they teach correctly or appropriately for everyone, especially for those at different stages of practice. Attainment of some spiritual state is one thing, but teaching the Dharma correctly, skillfully, and compassionately is a completely different and often more demanding matter. Now, I am aware that many people will probably think that your master, am being something like a spiritual monopolist or perhaps even a dictator by only allowing you to practice according to my specific way, by not actively encouraging you to research widely into other traditions or not permitting you to freely refer to other teachers or spiritual systems. It's primarily because I haven't personally vetted all those external materials, and I often don't know the authors personally. I don't know how profound they truly are, or how correct their particular teachings might be for your specific stage of spiritual development. So I simply don't dare to just let you explore freely and uncritically in all directions. If you My disciples, decide to go off on your own accord and study whatever you like from any source, then you must bear the full and sole responsibility for any consequences that may arise from that choice. And you will also likely find that your spiritual affinity, your close karmic connection with me as your direct teacher, will unfortunately come to an end, because I can no longer effectively check your understanding or guide you properly if you are drawing from too many disparate, potentially conflicting, or even erroneous sources. You've effectively chosen to sever that guiding affinity yourself by your own actions. So then, of course, you are free to go wherever you please. But if you are still sincerely my disciple, with one heart faithfully and earnestly directed towards me and the path that I teach, then you must be extremely careful and discerning in all your spiritual matters. Whatever questions or doubts may arise in your mind, you must ask me about them thoroughly and openly. And you must always ask with an attitude of utmost humility and genuine receptivity. Don't ever come asking questions as if you already know everything and are just testing my knowledge, or as if you're already convinced you're right and are merely seeking my validation for your preconceived notions. That kind of arrogant or challenging questioning also signals the erosion and eventual end of our teacher-student affinity, and such a person with such an attitude will also likely find that they need to leave and seek guidance elsewhere. You must always ask with genuine humility, with a sincere desire to learn and understand. If you happen to hear some Dharma principle from another source that seems to contradict what I've taught you, or that causes you to feel doubt or confusion, you must bring it to me for clarification. Sometimes you might hear something new, and on the surface it sounds very reasonable, very logical to you. You disciples might think to yourselves, oh yes, that makes perfect sense. But you haven't yet fully. Remember the cautionary story I told earlier about the fortune teller and the vastly different outcomes that resulted based on whether the person subsequently chose to pay homage to the Buddha and actively cultivate virtue? If we misunderstand fundamental principles, if we don't sincerely and consistently pay homage to the Buddha, which, in practical terms, means to diligently practice the Dharma, cultivate virtue, develop wisdom, and foster humility, if we neglect to consistently make merit through wholesome actions, then we might very well end up like the unfortunate fellow in that story, holding thousands of lives in our hands only by becoming a humble duck herder. We might foolishly think we're so clever, so spiritually accomplished, perhaps even floating on a cloud of self-importance, unwilling to genuinely bow to the Buddha within and without, lacking true humility, and neglecting the crucial work of making merit. Well, if that's our attitude, we'll just end up metaphorically herding ducks, you hear.